I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيدة.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I congratulate you on your excellent presidency of the Security Council this month. I thank Mr. Geir Pedersen, Special Envoy for Syria, and Mrs. Adam Wasorno, Director of Operations and Advocacy at OCHA, for their briefings. I welcome the ministers and deputy ministers participating in this meeting today. Thank you for supporting Syria and the Syrians. Mr. President, Syria is facing multifaceted, complex, and serious challenges. To overcome these challenges, the international community must pursue its positive engagement, and support must continue to be provided to Syria and the Syrians at this critical juncture of their present and future. Syria has grappled with multifaceted challenges in the past period. On Sunday, 22 June, Daesh carried out a terrorist suicide attack against Mar Ilyas Church in Damascus. Tens of innocent Syrians were martyred and injured. This treacherous terrorist attack did not only target the worshippers, but all Syrians and their national unity. Syrians have categorically rejected and condemned this attack. Security services arrested the members of the terrorist cell and brought them to justice. Syria reiterates its rejection of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Syria is intent on combating terrorism and calls on member states to support its efforts. Mr. President, the Israeli attacks continue to undermine efforts to achieve recovery and meet the aspirations of our people. The Israeli occupation entity pursues its attempts to impose a new occupation reality by undermining Syria's national unity, stoking strife, and obstructing efforts to achieve security and stability. I have previously briefed the Council on the Israeli occupation forces attacks against my country in my two letters of 16 July. And in my statement to the emergency meeting of the Security Council on 17 July. I will raise this issue again in my statement tomorrow during the resumed meeting of the Security Council on the situation in the Middle East. Syria calls on the Security Council and the United Nations and its General Secretariat to condemn Israeli attacks, prevent their recurrence, and compel the Israeli occupation forces to honor their obligations under the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement, to withdraw from areas it occupied in previous months, and end their occupation of the Syrian Golan in accordance with relevant UN resolutions, namely resolutions 242, 338, and 497. Mr. President, the Syrian government regrets the painful, bloody incidents in Suwaida and categorically rejects the occupation entity's attempts to exploit these incidents to carry out acts of aggression. My country deeply regrets and strongly condemns these shocking and grave violations in Suwaida. My country extends its condolences to families that lost loved ones. The government pursues its efforts to keep a lid on the situation, contain violence, and facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. The Syrian government coordinated with UN agencies the safe evacuation of UN staff and foreign nationals. This was carried out successfully. Despite the volatile and risky security environment, with the repeated breaches of the ceasefire agreement, the government issued multiple entry access approvals. Humanitarian convoys were facilitated through the Syrian Arab Red Crescent SARC in cooperation with humanitarian partners. The Syrian government remains committed to expanding humanitarian access. The Syrian government commends the efforts of the UN, UN OCHA, and SARC in this context. Security threats continue. A humanitarian worker was kidnapped. Government officials were targeted by sniper fire. Despite this, the government will remain committed to the delivery of humanitarian assistance to those affected. The government will support SARC needs assessment in Suwaida and Daraa, and will ensure the restoration of public services, mainly water and electricity, expeditiously. The Syrian government has pledged to prosecute and hold accountable the perpetrators of violations in Suwaida. The Ministry of Defense established a committee to verify the background and nationality of all those involved. The ministry stressed that it would not condone the perpetrators, even if affiliated with it, and that they would face severe penalties. All Syrians followed with concern the painful incidents in Suwaida. They categorically rejected hate speech, incitement to violence, and abuse of social media to ignite strife and launch malicious campaigns against all communities and fragment the country and displace the people and undermine civil peace and national cohesion. The Syrians reiterated that these attempts were doomed to fail and that Syria comes first for all Syrians. On a related note, the National Committee investigating coastal incidents in March completed its work and submitted its report to the President of the Republic. The committee held a press conference on its methodology and key findings and recommendations. The committee said it had conducted focused consultations with all stakeholders, international parties, and UN representatives. It revealed the number of victims and those potentially involved, calling on the judiciary to hold them accountable and to bring them to justice. Its recommendations were momentous and included a redress program for victims, police, security, and army governance projects, reconsideration of previous dismissal decisions, promotion of human rights, and establishment of an independent national human rights institution. On another note, the Higher Committee for the People's Assembly elections submitted to the President of the Republic the final version of the Assembly's provisional electoral system, including the timelines of the electoral process due in September. Mr. President, despite the positive international diplomatic momentum for Syria, despite the decisions to lift sanctions, and despite Syria's ongoing and constructive cooperation with the UN Special Envoy, Mr. Pedersen, and with all UN agencies operating in Syria, including the 6-month extension of the authorization for UN and its agencies to use Bab al-Hawa and Bab al-Salama and Ra'i border crossings as of 7 August. Despite all of this, the humanitarian situation is still dire and does not meet the aspirations of the Syrians. The figures presented by Mrs. Wosurno in her briefing earlier speak volumes. The humanitarian response plan is only 13% funded to date. Adding fuel to fire is the adverse effects of climate change. The country has reeled from the worst drought in 3 decades and from catastrophic wildfires in the northern countryside of Latakia. These wildfires caused grave material and environmental damage and destroyed more than 15,000 hectares of agricultural and forest land. Despite the tireless efforts and courage of the Syrian civil defense, despite support from friendly and brotherly countries to put out fires, and for this we are grateful, the severe lack of advanced equipment and the cumulative effect of decades of coercive measures have hindered efforts to put out and contain fire. We call on member states to stand in solidarity with Syria and to support the vital civil defense to curb environmental damage. We call on you to support humanitarian and development action, to support sustainable solutions, reconstruction efforts, and capacity building. We must definitively turn the page on sanctions in an irrevocable and irreversible manner. I thank the permanent representative of the U.S. for her statement earlier about delisting Syria from the UN sanctions list. The Syrian government underscores the dire need for more coordinated and coherent UN action. Fragmented interventions, parallel assessment exercises, and duplication of efforts undermine the effectiveness and impact of humanitarian operations. There must be full coordination with the Syrian government in respect of Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity. In conclusion, Mr. President, Syria was and remains a living mosaic of creative diversity that is not defined by any community or ethnicity. Syria takes part in its religious and cultural diversity. 100 years ago, Syrians of all persuasions and across Syria rose to defend the unity of their country and people. They rose to safeguard their free national decision. Their hopes came true, and Syria was a founding member of the United Nations in 1945. Today, Syrians uphold their national affiliation to their home country. They reject violence, terrorism, extremism, hate speech, and division. They believe that Syria will be for all its people, that its future will be shaped by all Syrians, women and men, and for all Syrians, without exception, away from polarization, exclusion, coercion, or destructive foreign interference. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for the statement.